All right, we are live for a very special broadcast. Today, I am joined by a Ringo Award nominated writer of Spencer and Locke and Going to the Chapel, who in his 12 plus year career in comics, it's a career that's began with an editorial internship at DC Comics. He's also served as a longtime reviews editor at the comic news powerhouse Newsarama, and he's worked for CBS, Netflix, and Universal Studios. And latest and greatest, and most importantly, why he's on the show today, is that his latest series, The OZ, which is a fantasy reimagining of the L. Frank Baum classic, is currently crushing it on Kickstarter with over 800 plus backers and a ton of time on the clock. So I'm thrilled to have on the Comics Launch podcast for the first time, David Pepose. David, how you doing, man?
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for the lovely introduction. So happy to be here. And I'm so excited to talk about the OZ, both as a project that's been long in the works for a very long time and as my first Kickstarter campaign. I couldn't be more blown away or more grateful for the response to this book. I think when readers get to see what artist Ruben Rojas and colorist Whitney Kogar and letterer DC Hopkins have in store, they're gonna realize it was worth the hype. I think this is one of the best things I've ever written, but even if it wasn't, this is easily one of the most beautiful projects I've ever had the privilege of working on. And I'm just so excited to see that fans seem to be responding in the same way.
Yeah, I am really excited for your success with this book. I know that even though this is your first Kickstarter, it's not like you just woke up one day and hit go on Kickstarter. This is something that you've been working towards for a long time.
Yeah.
So let's just begin with the book itself.
Sure.
I love a great, every creator I think out there. There's a lot of stuff that we get jealous of, but there's nothing that we get more jealous of as like an original, like high concept spin on a classic that makes you think, well, oh man, why didn't I think of that? And so just tell us about the book, what it is, what's unique about it, where the idea came from, and how you got to this point so far.
Sure. The OZ is like, what if Mad Max and the Hurt Locker took place in the Wizard of Oz? We've recontextualized Dorothy Gale killing the Wicked Witch of the West as something like a botched regime change. And so when Dorothy clicked her heels 3 times and went back to Kansas, she inadvertently plunged Oz into this vicious power vacuum that led to years of brutal civil war. So our story picks up a generation later with Dorothy's granddaughter and namesake, who's a disillusioned Iraq war veteran. And she's come home to Kansas with some real trauma and some real scars that she has to work through from her time overseas. Unfortunately, that gets interrupted by a tornado that touches down in her small Kansas town, and our new Dorothy finds herself trapped in the war-torn land of Oz. So she's going to have to navigate her past and her grandmother's legacy, not to mention her grandmother's former friends, if she hopes to survive the occupied zone, or as the locals call it, the OZ.
The OZ. Yeah. Love the high concept, obviously. And, this is one of those things where obviously the Wizard of Oz has been a classic and a staple that's been in our collective culture for over 100 years, 120 years or something like that. When it came to actually doing this and finding your own sort of twist on it, like how much research did you do? Like, did you look at other reimaginings? Did you go back to the original text? Like, have you just always been a Wizard of Oz fan? Like because like, you sort of have these ideas, but then it's like, okay, let me make sure I do this justice. What was your process there?
Exactly. So, it's funny because for me, my process is always, my career trajectory has never been a straight line. It's always been a zigzag, a lightning bolt. And it's funny how things from your past wind up coming together for the works that you wind up pursuing later. Yeah. So in the case of the OZ, I'd actually read the L. Frank Baum novels in college. I wrote a term paper in adolescent literature on how the Land of Oz was kind of a prototypical superhero universe. The way that Baum was sort of building on continuity and mythology over 20 novels, decades before Stan and Jack was ever on the scene. So, I had that kind of in the back of my head. And meanwhile, my first job out of college, I was a newspaper reporter. And so I covered things like crime and state politics, but I also had the mental health and military beats. And so a lot of the veterans that I interviewed, this was in rural Massachusetts, a place that doesn't necessarily get all the infrastructure or the tax dollars or the spotlight. And I remember interviewing people who had come back from overseas and were kind of struggling to reintegrate into, day-to-day society.
Yeah.
And the stories that they told me were really powerful. They really stood out and stuck with me. And I think that really influenced a lot of my work. Going back to explorations of trauma in my book Spencer and Locke, and I think we're really able to kind of to take that and apply it to the OZ. So, but yeah, I definitely, I definitely brushed up. I spoke with some friends of mine who did serve in Afghanistan. I'm college friends with a combat medic, so I talked with him about am I using the right lingo here? Is my jargon correct?
Right.
Even just kind of asking the deeper, more existential questions of we've been here for 20 years now. Why do you think that is? Is there a way to sort of extricate? So those questions really kind of shaped the general direction, the arc of this story. At the same time, we wanted to make sure that we were able to kind of have these fantasy elements. I consider this book tonally somewhere between Mad Max Fury Road and Star Wars Rogue One. So we're able to sort of have that kind of grit and that intensity, but still kind of maintain the wonder of Oz, even in a war-torn state. And so really kind of, some of my favorite moments in this book, there's the character moments, sort of exploring not just how Dorothy's been touched by war, but seeing how some of these classic mainstays like the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, the Lion, how they've been affected by this long war in the land of Oz.
Yeah.
But also seeing kind of how the fantasy genre and the war genre, seeing how they kind of, when they collide, what sparks come off. One example that I like to talk about is, Dorothy, having been trained as a soldier with that military eye, she sees that, yes, the land of Oz has teeth, but this wild magic can be used as a weapon to defend herself and those around her. So, for example, you wouldn't look at the Wizard of Oz's balloon as a platform for a halo jump.
Right.
But she would.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been a lot of the fun sparks flying off of this book. And it's really, I think the way I've written the whole thing, and so the way that we've kind of stuck the landing on it, I feel pretty happy with it.
So how big a story is this?
Yeah. So I originally wrote the OZ as 6 standard sized issues. And one of the main considerations that I brought that came to mind when I wanted to bring this to Kickstarter was, I want to give readers bang for their buck. Especially this is my introduction to a new community. Yep. This is different than the direct market. And I realized that the way I had written the OZ and the way I had structured it, it fit on a 3-act structure. So these issues paired together really nicely. So yeah, I'd written 6 standard sized issues. We're going to be releasing it over 3 Kickstarter campaigns, each double-sized. And yeah, I've written all of it. Artist Ruben Rojas is working on our 2nd installment right now. So the book that we're Kickstartering now is done, I promise.
Yeah.
We're just working on some pinups for it right now, sort of as our enhanced version of the book now that we've so amazingly overfunded. But yeah, so that the thing is, I wrote this as a standalone story, but that's kind of the theme of the OZ in a lot of ways, is just because one war has been won doesn't mean there's not another battle right around the corner.
Right. Getting back to the original series of serial A's nature of it. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
So this would be a universe that you could see yourself playing in for a long time. Then
I could see us doing 3 of these. If the demand's there and Ruben and Whitney and I's bandwidth is there. That's the one caveat that I would throw into this, is I would never do this series without Ruben Rojas and Whitney Kogar. They are just too good to be separated. And I feel like the book would not be nearly as good. I would not feel comfortable putting it out without having either of them on board.
Well, Kickstarter is such a visual platform, and there's a lot of people that will see that this book popped, but then they look at the pages and look at the art and the presentation and see it all sort of come together. And Okay, I see. I see where you're coming from. And something that you did, which I encourage a lot of creators to do, is put up a sequence. Like, don't just throw me a character design or a character sketch.
Right.
Show me what a fully lettered and colored, if it's going to be color, show me what a sequence is. Let me have confidence in the product that you're putting on the shelves. And so, from top to bottom, from the art to the lettering to the coloring, it's really a well put together package, and something that the whole team should be proud of. And I know you are. How did you put this team together?
Sure. Well, and it's funny because you talk about having, you want the readers to have confidence in your book. Yeah. And I think the best way to do that is for you to have confidence in your book. And the best way to do that, and not everybody can, but to have as much of it done as you can. And so I've been working on the OZ since my first book came out, since the first volume of Spencer and Locke.
Wow.
And for those who aren't familiar with that book was What If Calvin and Hobbes grew up in Sin City? Mm-hmm. And with a concept that potentially combustible, I didn't know if I was going to get to do another book. I knew that there were going to be some people who got what we were doing and loved it, and others who just would hate it on principle. And I didn't know what that ratio would be. Thankfully, the ratio was overwhelmingly in our favor. And so I realized, okay, I'm not going to get run out of business. So I've been working on the OZ for a long time. It was one of the first 3 ideas I came up with after Spencer and Locke. And so Ruben was the first person I found. I found him on Twitter. I believe it was late 2017, early 2018. So we've known each other for a little while now.
Yeah.
And I had pitched him 3 books. The OZ, Grand Theft Astro, which had been then unacquired, and a 3rd book that I'm still redeveloping. And Ruben loves fantasy and post-apocalyptic stuff. So he immediately keyed into the OZ. And it's funny. I always have artists do 6 pages in a cover just to make sure it's a good fit.
Yeah.
Something to show to potential publishers. And I saw Ruben's cover for the book. Our main cover.
Was that the original cover that we see here?
Yes. Yeah. And it was so incredible. His take on the Tin Man in particular. I just was so blown away that I said, Ruben, keep working. Come hell or high water. I promise you I will get this book made.
Yeah.
And so it took a little while for us to find the right colorist on board. My friend Michael Mocchio, who then was an assistant editor at Boom Studios. Now he's over at Scholastic and Mad Cave. I've known him since the trenches at Newsarama. And I was one of his editors when he was a reviewer. And he was like, I love working with Whitney Kogar. I love working with DC Hopkins. You really should hit them up. And so I met DC at Denver Comic-Con, I believe, a year or so back. We hit it off immediately. He's such a laid-back, gracious, just chill guy, which is something that I need in my teams, as someone who can be a little high-strung. And he's really the ultimate team player. He's kind of the glue that binds us all. So he's wonderful. He's very deliberate with his choices, and he's very. We have a great communication style. We honestly will DM just over Twitter. He'll send me screen grabs of what he's thinking, and we'll just kind of workshop it live. Whitney was the last piece of the puzzle. Colorists are so important for people who don't get that. Art makes or breaks a comic. Yeah. Well, colors make or break your art. The having the wrong colorist can really tank even the strongest line work, but having the right colorist can elevate any artwork. And so I'm very picky with my colorists, and I tend to have a lot of opinions on my colors. And that's why it's so amazing working with somebody like Whitney, because I don't really have to have a lot of opinions for her. She kind of knocks it out left, right, and center. I very rarely have any tweaks, and it's usually like, hey, can we add a little bit of a red tinge here, or the bombs, can we make them pop a little more? She's a real pro. She's terrific to work with. And it's like when you have that kind of team, it's hard not to feel confident. That's my secret as a writer, is work with artists who are so good that nobody cares what your writing looks like.
Yeah.
It's very freeing. It's very liberating.
Yeah. And then you get that backhanded compliment. It's like, well, I bought it for the art, but hey, it was actually
the writing's not bad either.
It was actually a decent story.
It makes me feel good walking into a situation knowing that even if a reviewer hates the book, hates it on concept, hates my writing, they have to say the art looks good. They just, if they can't say the art looks good, then like clearly it's a bad faith read, and I don't pay any attention to it. But I think, the great thing about this team is I think we've all inspired each other to bring our A game.
Yeah.
Seeing Ruben's work on the Tin Man, for example, I was just like, oh, that guy's going to be he's going to be a fan favorite. Seeing his designs on the Lion, who, full disclosure, he only makes a very quick cameo in this first issue.
Yep.
But he's going to show up. He's going to show up with a roar in issue 2, and 3, and seeing Ruben's designs for that character, I was like, oh man, like I like chills, and that kind of that's the reason why I marathoned writing this. I don't usually do that for a book. Usually, I kind of wait for my artist to catch up, and I juggle a million different things. But Ruben Rojas is so talented that I wrote 6 issues in a row.
Yeah.
Because I was just like, I don't want him to wait for 1 second on this book. So
you don't want him to get snatched up.
No. I mean, he and I were already talking about sort of what's next for us. Sort of whether that is the next book going to be an OZ sequel, if we're feeling it, or is it going to be a different project altogether. But I love working with Ruben. I've been so fortunate with the collaborators I've had with Jorge Santiago Jr. and Gavin Guidry. And just like I told Jorge when I started working with him, I said, you're the first one to take a chance on me. You're my brother in arms in this. I promise you that as long as you want work, you will have it. And that's the same thing that I've told Ruben, is that, he is such a wonderful collaborator, just a true artistic partner in this, that I'll keep working with him till the wheels come off. I will keep giving him whatever work that he's interested in, because I'm just so blown away by his incredible talent.
Yeah. And I want to just put a pin in something that you said earlier, as your approach, because I know that there's a lot of writers out there that are like, oh, I can't find artists to work with, or I don't, or, it's tough to find the right people or everything. Sure. But work begets more work, right? And the ability to go and say, hey, all right, no matter what happens, a cover in 6 pages. Yeah. And I might have to walk away from this project, but I'm willing to invest that to show how serious I am.
Yeah. I think for me, whenever I approach an artist, I will not approach an artist unless I have 2 things. I need a first issue script done, and I need a full treatment. I feel like that is the least I can offer an artist to say that I am serious about this project and that there is a plan. Like you said, though, work does beget work. I mean, having Spencer Unlock and Spencer Unlock 2 and Going to the Chapel as calling cards. I can say all 3 of these books have been nominated for Ringo Awards. So it's a little bit of an indicator that, I might have, I might push you to a higher standard than but I promise you the work will speak for itself.
Yeah.
I think that's certainly a help. But I think the thing that I always want to stress, because I think creators, when they're starting out, and I get it, like it takes a lot to put yourself out there to decide, I want to be a creator, I want to write, or I want to draw, whatever. And so when you have that excitement, of course, enthusiasm's got to put you over the threshold. And I think a lot of people then they have these very inflated expectations for themselves.
Yeah.
Where they say, my first book's going to be my Why the Last Man. It's going to be my masterpiece. It's going to be, we're going to keep running this train until I die. And I think same thing with a Kickstarter. I think people look at the success of the OZ, for example, and they say, oh, well, why haven't we been 500% funded in a week and a half? And the thing is that none of this is overnight. Finding an artist is not overnight. Funding a Kickstarter is not overnight. I've, like you said in my introduction, I've been in the periphery of the industry for 12 years. It took, the fact that Ruben and I have been working together in some capacity for over a year, to get what we've gotten together. That's one of those things I don't want people to sort of feel like, oh man, why don't I find everything overnight? Why don't I get success overnight?
Yeah.
It took me a while to find Ruben. You got to dig in deep. I think my training as a reporter has really helped me in that regard, where if I don't have a solution, I could just spend all day digging until I find one. And so that means I'm checking Twitter, I'm checking Tumblr, I'm checking Instagram, I'm checking the art schools, I'm checking people who I like's friends list. I'm checking Behance. I don't know how you pronounce it. I always think of it as Beyonce, which is terrible. I'm checking every, DeviantArt. I'm checking every platform all day, every day. That's just what I do. And sometimes I find artists that I really like and I don't have a project for them. So I mark it as a bookmark. And maybe later I hit them up when something pops up. I've got a laundry list of to-do stuff, of projects that I want to start working on, but just don't have the time or the bandwidth. And so sometimes I'll mark, oh, hey, this would be good for, project cake, So I think it can be discouraging. Comics can be a discouraging place. And I think that failure and rejection and setback, you got to get used to that taste. I pitched Spencer and Locke all over town, and all we got was the one yes, but that's all you need. But if we hadn't gotten that one yes, I told my team, like, I will self-publish this out of spite if I have to, right. Like that's just, if you believe in the work, you will push it, and if you can't find a door to open, you will break a window. But I think, it's just, this has been a long time coming. It's the platform that I've been building as a reviewer for over a decade, the relationships I've built there, the track record that I've built over 3 separate books, and then pushing really, 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 really hard, which is something you and I have talked about privately, is sort of, how hard should I push? And you smartly said, at a convention, do you stop selling when you hit a certain point? And the answer is no. You kind of owe it to yourself, and you owe it to your collaborators to really kind of, hit the ground running as hard as you can for as long as you can, because this is a finite window. And, the success you have starting out builds. And so the next time you do this, you'll have more success. And the next time you have this, you'll have more success. And that's really the thinking that people should be thinking about when they're looking to either launch their first book or launch their first Kickstarter, or even just dip their toe in the creative field, is that your first dipping of the toe doesn't have to be big. It doesn't even have to be public. It's just, you put in the reps, and then the success will come after that.
Yeah. We had a good discussion about it, and it's this thing where, 800 plus backers, that's already in elite company, right? In the crowdfunding world. But when you also think about it, like, that probably means that there are hundreds and hundreds more people just like those 816 that need to know about this book and would buy it if they did.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then on the flip side of it, though, like you've probably been to conventions that didn't have more than 800 people at them, right?
Yeah.
And so that is the beauty of
staggering number. It's a staggering number. I mean, yeah. I used to consider my benchmark at a con was, if I could sell 20 trades a day, I would feel happy. And so, this is suddenly 40 cons worth of stuff in 10 days. Yeah. And that's been its own unique learning curve, and this is a conversation I've had with Charlie Stickney from White Ash, who I've considered to be a real guide in terms of kicking this Kickstarter off. He has said quite rightly, okay, you've blown past your expectations, and first off, be happy, you've won, you've gotten what you've wanted, but you want to keep building your readership. But how do you do it in a way that doesn't feel like a cash grab? How do you continue to include value, to enhance your book, to give more rewards to your backers, to make it so it justifies growing this readership? So we've talked a lot about how do I enhance the book itself? So I'm talking with our printer right now about what's the viability of enhanced covers, whether that's raised UV or something even more extreme like a metallic cover.
Yep.
We're weighing our options there, or adding pinups to the book. I'm talking with some really cool artists about that right now, including our mutual friend Joe Mulvey, who's got a really cool. He showed me the pencils for his print. It looks amazing. Or a really talented guy named Alex Cipriano. He's done a Tin Man print that looks like if Jeff Darrow did his take on our Tin
Nice.
Man. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, it's a great opportunity to reach out to some of those
Yeah.
artists that maybe you've bookmarked but don't have anything for them bigger.
Exactly.
But this is a great, like, nothing builds goodwill with an art than sending them work, and you're in an opportunity
Exactly.
to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's people talk about, anthologies all the time. Why do people do anthologies? Because and some of it's to get your work out there and to sort of get your reps out publicly if you'd like. But I found it's also a great way to build relationships with artists that might not have time to commit to a full series. I did a short thing with Chris Sheehan, who's got the autumnal out over at Vault, and I consider him a buddy now because he's just when you work in the trenches with somebody, that's what happens. Or Hannah Templar, she did a terrific cover for Going to the Chapel, and we're talking about what her availability might be for a cover or a pinup for the OZ down the line. So yeah, I think this thing about business, everybody talks about networking like it's a dirty word, and I get it because that the word networking, there's that transactional connotation to it. But I think being a part of the community and being friends with people and just kind of talking to people like they're human beings, that's really the great foundation for things. And then when you sort of have an opportunity to collaborate, then you can say, hey buddy, like I got this thing, would you be interested? Whereas I think there are so many people who they feel that anxiety, they feel like they got to get it done now. And you got to be patient with yourself as a creator. This isn't, your successes are not built over weeks. They're built over years. And this is something my younger siblings we have almost a decade between us. And so they're in their mid-20s and they've always asked, they're fresh out of school and they've said, oh, like, I don't know how to make any of this stuff work. I don't have connections like you have connections. And my thought has been my connections it's taken me over a decade to build them. Yeah. And that was before, suddenly people are introducing me to like their agents or stuff, but it took a decade to do that. So that's the thing is people just need to be patient with themselves and then kind of give themselves the opportunity to let things flow organically. That'll really pay off in a much bigger way than trying to figure out what's the quick transactional fix. People will smell that a mile away.
Yeah, definitely. So this first Kickstarter launch, you shared a preview with me. I looked at it. I'm like, man, this is going to crush it on Kickstarter. It's the kind of thing that will do well there. But even you said the performance is blowing you out of the way.
Absolutely.
Like, where are your backers coming from, and what have you done to really just make sure to like? Obviously, I know some of the stuff you're a little bit baffled by, but what do you think some of the things that you did do specifically, besides just making a really cool project, in order to get this in front of the right kind of people?
Yeah. Well, some of it is relationships that I've built. Yeah. Having been on both sides of the comics publicity trenches, I know my way around a press release. And I think reaching out to press with a personal appeal, one great example is my pal Brett Schenker from Graphic Policy. I've read Graphic Policy for a very long time, but Brett and I did not know each other before the first volume of Spencer and Law came out. And I emailed him and I said, hi, Brett, like, I'm David Pepose. I've written for Newsarama. I'm a big fan of your work on Graphic Policy. Wanted to see if I could chat with you about it. I'm diving into the other side of the pool. Granted, not everybody's going to be able to say, oh, I write for Newsarama, but being able to have that personal approach, that's really helped. I think this concept also like kind of was able to tip over the net a little bit. Something that I thought was very important. We had our 3 variant covers and I wanted to save those as exclusives for targeted outlets. So I approached IGN, Sci-Fi, and Comic Book Resources. Which I think they're sort of they're industry leaders as far as geek news is concerned. And I said, look, guys, hey, I'd love to chat with you about this Kickstarter I've got going, and I'd love to offer you each an exclusive cover. That you will be the only ones running it. And I think that kind of really tipped us over the net with those 3 outlets who might otherwise, have said, well, they're not always covering Kickstarters. Right. And offering an exclusive really does go a long way. I think I pushed the rollout for a long time. You know, so like when I put it to Kickstarter, I did sort of a soft announcement of just the approval, just a screen grab of the approval.
Yeah.
Something else I did that I don't know, your mileage may vary. This may be something that might not work upon repeat attempts. We'll find out, I guess. I did not reveal this book as a Wizard of Oz book until the Kickstarter launched. I did 10 days of teasers instead, and I referred to it as Project Saffron. And that's something that I've been doing in my newsletters for over a year. I actually just hit my 1-year anniversary with my newsletter this week. And it's a way for me to tease projects without blowing the reveal.
Yeah.
And I think that really helped in a big way, because I was doing teasers with little quotes from the books, just little snippets of the art without context. And I think people were like, oh man, what is this? Like, I know it's fantasy and it sounds like there's a war brewing, but what is this?
Good. Yeah.
And then, yeah, you know, I a lot of it, you know, I know people get self-conscious about promoting themselves. And the thing that helps me is I say, I'm not promoting myself. I'm promoting my artist and I'm promoting my team.
Yeah.
Because I've never met an artist who's an extrovert besides Joe Mulvey. And so, you know, most artists I've worked with are very introspective people. They certainly don't have the connections I do. They certainly don't have the time or wherewithal or platform to shout from the rooftops.
Yeah.
So it's up to you as the project leader. That's something you owe your team.
Yeah. And that's a great way. Like, that's that mindset that gets you over. Like, I know some people, especially when they get started, you've got this imposter syndrome. You've got this feeling like, who am I to be, or, you know, who's going to care about this? And it's like, no, wait, do I care about this artist and this team that I put together? Absolutely.
Yes. And that's really helped me out a lot. And a lot of it's just knocking on doors. Literally anybody, you know, I was sending emails to, I think it was 100, 150 of just like friends, family, my girlfriend's family, my girlfriend's friends, you know, all my siblings, all my cousins, just saying like, hey, I've got this Kickstarter running, and you know, it's going to be launching on this date. This is going to be the link for where it's at. You can click notify me at launch. If you've never done a Kickstarter, here's the link to sign up. Yeah. Make it as idiot proof as you can. And even then, I still had to there were some pitfalls that I had. I still think that the stigma in the comics industry about Kickstarter, I think, is mostly vanished. I think, you know, you see when the writer of Batman's doing a Kickstarter, it's fair game.
Yeah.
But I think amongst friends and family, I know I had one person who just didn't understand that this is a pre-order, not a charity. It's different than a GoFundMe where you're looking to say, pay your rent, or pay for your medical bills. This is just, you know, this is how you order the book. It's no different than a storefront.
Right.
And so, you know, I think not being shy in that regard, making sure you're posting on social media, you know, that can be a little challenge for me, is that I got my Facebook down, I got my Twitter down, and then I'm like, oh, I got to do Instagram, you know, or do an Instagram story. Like, those are all very important, because you never know what, you know, if one tweet gets you one backer, that's worth it. That's a calculus that's worth it to me. So yeah, I think beyond that, and then I think just, you know, knocking on every door you can possibly find and not being shy with what you're sharing.
Yeah.
That's part of the other reason we did double-sized issues, was I could offer an extended preview. We could offer 11 pages instead of the usual 5 or 6. And I think that has helped in a big way. I think knowing how to market your project is another thing. This might be kind of the way that I create, so it may not be one size fits all. But I always find that if I can't sum it up in a sentence or two, that something's not right.
Yeah.
That like conceptually, you need to simplify. That's why I like my elevator pitches. You know, I don't have to get into all the lineage of the Wizard of Oz. You know, that's sort of the extended pitch. But what if Mad Max took place on the Wizard of Oz? The image clicks. You know exactly what you're getting into. And I think that's also helpful for me, because then I can sort of hit up target demographics. I can say, do you like Mad Max? Do you like Fallout? Do you like, you know, the Old Guard? Do you like Fables? Do you like DMZ? And so that way, you know, you can really kind of specify who the target audience is with this book, and then figure out kind of what's the universal hook to get people who might not be so sure involved.
Yeah. And I'm a bit of a connoisseur of brilliant titles, like just the titles, and there have been Comics Tribe books that I'm like, I love this pitch. We're ditching the title. We got to swap something else in. But this is one of those check all the boxes of $1 million title for me, because it says what the story is, but it does have a little bit of that irony where you wait, the occupied zone, OZ, okay, there's and it reinforces another angle, but it's instantly familiar and recognizable with the imagery that you pair with it. It's short, and it also like passes the internet test. Like if you Google the way you put it, yours is going to come up. And so and I will say, like, compared to Spencer and Locke,
yes,
like I get it. I got Spencer and Locke after you made the Calvin Hobbes concept things, but I'm like, okay, you know what? This has that a little bit more of an advantage than that title goes, and so way to go for knocking it out of the park, man.
For me, the concept is never set in stone until I think of a title.
Yeah.
The title is usually the thing that makes it all click. And the OZ, that's the whole reason I brought the Wizard of Oz into the picture in the first place, it was the title. I had written down a bunch of inspirations of just random fantasy, because that's what I wanted to try, a fantasy book. And as I'd written down, Lord of the Rings and Lloyd Alexander and Piers Anthony and Harry Potter and Wizard of Oz, and I saw the cursor flashing on Oz, and I was like, oh man, what if that was like an acronym for something? And then I thought of DMZ, and then I thought, oh, it's the occupied zone. And the story hit me like a bolt of lightning. Nice. I was like, oh, this isn't just a fantasy book, it's a war book.
Yeah.
So yeah, I consider myself really fortunate with the title on that one.
It's funny how like these flash of lightning moments happen where it's like, it wasn't there one moment, then it's there. And now I'm going to work on this for the next 5 to 10 years, maybe.
Yeah. I mean,
and it's almost like it's always existed, right?
Yeah.
That's the beauty of creating.
It feels like when I feel like a story, when I have a concept that I love, it feels like excavating rather than inventing. Yeah. Where like, I have this concept, and what's the best path to getting there? Maybe it's because I live like a slob, but like I think of it as like you're in your bedroom door and you're trying to get to your bed. It's pitch black and there's all this crap on the ground. And like, what's the one path you can get to your bed without stepping on clothes or glass or trash or your dog? That's sort of how I approach storytelling. It's like very much like sculpting, where you're just kind of like, does this feel right? Ram V did a really interesting interview last year. We was talking about how it's all about the instinct to him. It's what feels right in his gut. And I feel like that is definitely something, that's the way I approach it. Yeah. It's just what feels right to me. And that's the same way with pursuing stories. I mean, I get hit with lightning fairly regularly at this point with my story concepts. And so I have to take a break and just say, all right, I'm putting this on the back burner. And if I like it again in a month, then I'll pursue it. Because the idea is, when they first hit you, they seem really cool. And then you realize you've just invented Inception again, or you've just invented Armageddon.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like, I give it a little bit of time to chill. And if I still really like it a month later, then I go full bore into it.
And I've also found those ideas hit like right when you're at a tough point in the project that you've already made a way down. And now it's like, it's sort of like the equivalent of, oh, maybe you should stop and it'll be easier if I just go and do this thing. When it's not, it's just, you've got a little itch that you creatively that you want to scratch.
That's exactly how I operate. Is every time I write a book, I have a bucket list, and every book I write, I try to check some things off. But because writing a book is really hard, I add new things to the bucket list literally every book, where it's like, oh man, like the OZ, for example, love the book, so excited about the book, marathon through that book. It was a hard book to write, and so while I'm writing, I'm like, oh god, I really want to write like a horror book next, or I really want to write a natural disaster book next, or I really want to write a time travel book next. And so like, as I'm noodling around, I'm like, oh, that's a cool high concept. All right, put it on the list. You'll get back to it later. I try to be a real taskmaster in myself, where I'm like, I have something that's due now. Get it done now. And then you can play around with whatever new idea you've got scribbled on your phone. Your volume went out, I think.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, there you go.
The mic,
Yeah.
there was some
No worries.
vacuuming going on downstairs.
Yeah.
My boy loves the vacuuming, but even though he's too big to even, or too small to even push it. But yeah, if you allow yourself that 5 to 10 to 15 minutes to just get it out of your head and put it somewhere that you know you can go back to it.
Yeah.
I think often you find it's like, okay, maybe there isn't quite as much there as I thought if I let myself get at it, and I'm not going to go down the research rabbit hole to make it into something.
The other thing for me is I write dessert first. I don't write linearly. I don't write in order. For me, it's all about building momentum. And so like whatever images I've got, I write them down first. And I always, whatever's easiest, I just do that. And then by then I can either figure out like, is there enough meat to this? Or have I written like 2 sequences that I had fun with? And then now I'm like, oh, I'm stuck with this book. I thus far I've been really lucky that like the dessert first approach, I haven't had many concepts that I'm like, oh, okay, I wrote all the cool stuff and now I don't like it. But it helps me, just because the reader experiences it linearly doesn't mean you have to produce it linearly.
Right.
And so that way it's sort of, I get to chisel away at the hard stuff or at the easy stuff. And then by the time I get to the hard stuff, I'm like, well, I've already gone this far. It's just connective tissue at this point.
Right. Yeah.
Let's
set it up. And I like that analogy of doing the dessert first. I'm working on something that's like the first new thing that I've been noodling on, and so far most of it has just been filling up a notebook with utter nonsense. And I'm sort of at the stage where like I almost realize like if I don't just get a scene down and something fun, then I could run the danger of spending years in pointless world building and economy creation and fictional family trees, and it felt like that's not really what it's at. What it's about. It's like, all right, let's see if there's something really worth putting the time into.
Right. I see my guy Justin Jordan says this chat needs far more mentions of me. I do, I think that is important for creators, not to mention Justin Jordan, but just like to find creators that you see as role models. I've always admired the way that Justin does business. He's a concept machine, but he was the first person that made me realize like, oh man, like, what the best thing, the best way to pitch a book, have like an awesome artist attached. I said to myself when I was coming up with Spencer and Locke, I said, who's the next Trad Moore?
Yeah.
It was Jorge Santiago Jr., my ride or die. I think Ruben's the same way, but also just the way that he's always looking to diversify. He's doing stuff on Comixology. He's doing stuff on Webtoons. He's doing stuff in the direct market. He's doing stuff out of the direct market. I think if there's
where's that Kickstarter, Justin? Come on, man. Get back on the podcast.
Justin, leave me some room, please. I feel like Justin is, he's the epitome of a creator who has future-proofed himself as best as one can in this kind of turbulent market. But I think, having influences, I'll never admit it to his face. John Layman, I consider to be another influence. I think he was the guy who really galvanized the image renaissance. The Walking Dead kind of set that baseline, but Chew came out and people started realizing, oh, maybe this is where the next Y is going to be. The next Ex Machina. It's not going to be at Vertigo anymore. It's not going to be at Ex Machina. So, I think having your October, having your peer group is very important, because those are the people that are going to sort of signal boost you, and those are going to be the ones that kind of you come up with. But I think having creators who you look to as more aspirational figures, I think that's really important in helping triangulate where your career is going to go. So Justin, I'll be sending you IMs later with more questions. But I think that's something that I'll use to justify the advertisement for Justin there. But I think having and also I think you'd be surprised at how many creators are really willing to offer their advice. I mean, Tyler, you've been very generous, with your advice to me. I know we've met at conventions, And so, I consider us friendly, but like, you didn't have to like talk me down when I said, what do I do? We've overshot so high. How do we make this, how do we make this thing work?
Yeah.
And you really were smart, and you just said, you don't stop selling at cons, do you? And so I do think that especially Kickstarter really promotes the collaborative nature of the comics industry. You don't have
I will
to
say,
fight.
and just to pinpoint on that, the greatest thing about Kickstarter, and this will be a great for Justin when he does launches, is that most of us, especially those of us that are around us and doing the convention scenes, we've been making connections with other creators that have Kickstarter experience and that have a following on Kickstarter. And the best thing about that Kickstarter ecosystem is that when anyone that you're following backs your project, which a lot of creators did for yours, it sends out a message to anyone that's following them. And so like, I knew when you launched because I had half a dozen creators like right away, just in my feed who I follow, you show up in their feed. And so that is like this Kickstarter account that you just created for one launch, right? Like you're going to have, you're on track to 1,000 plus backers that then you can have instant access to that are following you, but you also have the ecosystem of people that have backed you and will back you in the future. And so it becomes this, like, this is going to be one of the most powerful business assets that you own for the going into the future. And so, it's just a great position to be in right now.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that's been most striking to me is I've really said Kickstarter is like a different planet with its own laws of physics. If Scott Snyder decided to drop a Beyonce and put out a new book in the direct market on the same day that my book is launched, that's a kill shot, because, comic shop owners, they have limited shelf space and limited bandwidth, and they have to assume the risk for every single book that's ordered. Not every publisher is going to do a return policy. Yeah. So, whereas Kickstarter, that's their model, is they want to keep you in the Kickstarter ecosystem. They do a really effective job at promoting my book and other people's books. Dropping on the same day as Scott Snyder and Kickstarter was the best thing that could have possibly happened to me. We had a huge wind at our back because so many people joined Kickstarter that day. They got Scott's book, and then they say, oh, hey, if you want another book, this is the next book. Scott is.
Yeah, and for those people that don't know, because this isn't how it's always worked, but in the last, I'm not sure exactly when they implemented it, but Kickstarter is now, when you back projects, it's showing you other projects like what you backed or that other people have backed, and when you are sending out updates, or if someone else that has a project that's live on Kickstarter, that's a comics project, is sending out updates, they're also including a couple other projects with all of those updates that are going into those backers' things. So so this is one of those things where it's a faulty narrative for creators that are out there. It's like, oh, Todd McFarlane shouldn't be coming on Kickstarter. Scott Snyder shouldn't be coming on Kickstarter. Like, McFarlane brought 1,000 people that had never backed anything on Kickstarter to the ecosystem. Right. And so it's so true. Like that is a great point, that instead of seeing, oh, I'm done, let me just forget about my Kickstarter or delay it to some other time when I hope no one is launching. It's like, no, I'm going to draft on this bad boy.
Yeah, absolutely. A rising tide floats all boats on Kickstarter, because that's their business model. They want you to succeed because they want to get their cut. Yeah. And so, having more people brought to the ecosystem, it's only good. It's only good for your campaigns. That means you're able to sort of coordinate with different people. I mean, I consider myself fortunate that I knew that Scott's campaign was coming. I think if it had hit that exact day, I would have had a heart attack just out of sheer shock. But I thankfully I got wind of it a little bit earlier. And Scott and I were talking the night before our Kickstarter's launched, and we were talking about the OZ. He's been very supportive of that book for a long time. And he was like, hey, sorry, I'm going to get you a pull quote on this. I've just been swamped because of everything going on at DC and with my Kickstarter launching tomorrow. And I was like, oh, buddy, we're going to be Kickstarter twins. This is great. I'm the Danny DeVito and he's the Arnold Schwarzenegger. But it's
But both Danny and Arnold got pretty good paydays for that one. So it
Yeah.
sounds like that's kind of how it worked out.
Yeah, that's how it's working here. So yeah, I think, you know, Kickstarter, it's very different. It's very collaborative. It's very interactive. And you know, it's been a learning curve for sure. You know, it's like running. I've said that this is like doing 10 comic conventions back to back. I'm gonna sleep for a week when this campaign is done.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, you know, I'm gonna ride this as hard as I can. Because like you said, I owe it not to myself, I owe it to my team. I owe it to the future of this book. I owe it to, you know, the whole reason I did Kickstarter was I wanted to invite more people to the table. I wanted to do outreach to a demographic that I had never done outreach for. And I wanted to build that wider consensus. I want to introduce my direct market readers to my Kickstarter readers and have them break bread together. And so, you know, if that's the objective, you have to keep hustling, even if it's just posting on social media every single day. You know, although that said, there are plenty of podcasts out there. There are plenty of news outlets. You know, I'm going to start doing Instagram live streams. We're just figuring out the timing for that. Just to have that little bit of extra Q&A interactivity with the readers. Yeah. You know, there are so many things that you can do as a creator. And that's the whole reason you're on Kickstarter is you got tired of asking for permission. Great. You don't have to ask for permission anymore. Now just go out and do it.
I think that's a great way to send everyone that listens to this now and in the future off with their marching orders, David. Congrats again on the tremendous success. This campaign, as we're recording here, is going to be alive for another 19 days. Yep. And I'm sure you will be seeing a whole lot more from the OZ and David Pepose over the years. So thank you so much for joining me for this stream, man.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I will look forward to seeing this book continue to stay near the top of the charts over at Kickstarter. It's awesome, man.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. This was great.
Yeah, thank you so much. And everybody for watching, thank you. And can't wait to see what you all launch next. Take care now.